Welcome, listeners. This is writing coaches Mike Consol and Julie Miller. We're going to talk about readability this week. You know, people have editors for a reason, Julie. We write, and then if we're very self-aware, we sometimes wonder, am I being clear about this? Are people going to understand what I've written here? What does it take to help ensure that our writing has a high degree of readability?
You're absolutely right. And the shocking thing is when I tell people in my writing classes, your readers don't read what you've written, and they skim and they scan. And so how do we, which is the questions you've asked, how do we get them to read what we view as important information, which will end up with great outcomes? But that is really the $1,000,000 question, Michael, I'll tell you. But one of the things, and we know this from marketing and everything else, you have to know your reader inside and out to be able to deliver content that appeals to them, solves a problem, eases their pain. And that really is important.
Well, and when you talk about skimming, I think of myself reading a nonfiction book. I read a lot of fiction, but I also read nonfiction all day, actually, read nonfiction. But when I'm reading a nonfiction book, I do a lot of skimming. But then when I hit a rich vein, of course, I want to read it word for word. So that's what I start to do. That author will fail me if he or she has not delivered on the readability front. I always tell people to think in terms of conversational writing, think in terms of writing like you speak, then cleaning it up by taking out the colloquialisms that don't really belong there. You want to formalize it a little bit. I think the biggest problem, certainly in business, that I see is that when people sit down to write, they start thinking writing is formal. I want to make myself sound intelligent. So what ends up happening is they use a lot of words they wouldn't normally use that are designed to make them sound eruditious. Words like eruditious they'll use.
I love it.
And the writing becomes very dense. It becomes very dense and impenetrable. And that's when people bail. They bail when they feel like, I can't penetrate this. I don't know what this person is saying. And it's not because they don't understand the words. It's because they don't have any patience for communication that is not on a human level.
Correct. And, to take it just even another level, I help a lot of folks, big companies, with their RFPs, their proposals. And, so often the phone call I get is when they didn't get the proposal, they didn't win the contract. And I'll say, well, what was the issue? Was it the money? And they, oh no, it's the words. We didn't connect with the reader. And just a quick story about that is that years ago when they were doing the big dig in Boston, which was that big tunnel under the city, and they were looking for a specific specialty in this technical part of the build. And so they contacted the Seattle firm and said, we've looked you over and we want you to fly out here and meet the board, meet the team, and we'll go from there. So everybody got buffed and puffed, suited and tied, and flew out there. Lots of notes were taken, everybody was nodding, et cetera, et cetera. And so they went back and wrote the proposal, and weeks passed and they didn't hear. And when they called and said, well, did you get our proposal? Oh, yes. Well, did you award the contract? Oh, yes. Well, did we get it? No. And why is that? Because they said, you spent all your time telling us how great you were. You never said, these are the problems you want to be solved, and we're the company to do it. It's just stunning.
Well, and you see that with websites all the time, that the website talks about itself, not the person who's visiting the website, that draws them in and really says, we're here for you. This is what we can do for you. Instead, it's all about them. And it's really a change of perspective. And, one of the things also that happens in business that just destroys readability is besides not having the proper focus of the writing on the person, the recipient. There's also just a lot of here. I'm going to use a big word now: obfuscation, where nobody
Yes.
wants to say that they failed at something, or nobody wants to say that there's been a financial loss this quarter. So they use all this obscure language that they mince words. They try to soften the words by mincing them, and in the end, the reader is kind of left reading these phrases that are like, "What is this supposed to really be saying?" People appreciate just direct communication. It's honest, direct, and look, when you're dealing with shareholders, or customers for that matter, certainly shareholders, they demand transparency. They demand that you tell them what is happening and say it in no uncertain terms, because you lose trust when you don't
Well,
communicate
Michael,
frankly.
you are dead on right. And they actually blame the failure of the complete collapse of Enron on the fact that the way documents were written, no one could understand them. And so they thought things were just fine, right? So, and true, when you're talking about dense writing, long sentences, technical writers are particularly prone to do that. And what they don't remember often is they know what they're talking about it, but they're writing it for the end user. It may just, it's a manual or a part that you're trying to explain to a user. You remember when Microsoft first came out and they had that big, thick, uh, manual that we were all to read. And, what happens is people would be calling because they could not understand the manual instructions because it was written for people who are technical, not for users who were just trying to figure out how to turn the darn thing on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the best thing, the business people who are out there listening to this, the best thing you can do, hire a professional writer. Unless you're willing to learn how to write with some expertise on your own, you really want to, it doesn't have to be a staff member. You can hire outside, you can hire a
Right,
writing house or whatever. But the value of clear communication, particularly written communication, which is the hardest form of communication in most cases for businesses, really warrants that a professional be doing this, because I can't tell you the number of times I've seen companies, whether it's a press release or the copy on their website or a quarterly report, writing in a fashion that is terrible. I'm reminded of when Gwyneth Paltrow, and I think his name was Chris, I forget his first name, Martin, the lead singer
yes,
for the band Coldplay, were getting a divorce. But they didn't call it a divorce. They called it, or a separation. They called it a conscious decoupling. So everybody had a good laugh out of that, just like you just did, Julie. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it's another example of how here in writing, they sat down and they tried to figure out, how can we say this so that it sounds like it was, it's all hearts and roses and powder puffs. Everybody understands what a separation is. Everybody understands what a divorce is. What they don't understand
right,
is people who don't have the self-awareness and the self-esteem to simply say, we're going to separate and
right,
communicate clearly. If you can't do that, or you have communications people that are doing that for you, fire them.
right. Exactly. Well, I teach folks to use the readability statistics that's in Word. And I find that engineers who write these, long, I mean, I think the final winner of the longest sentence was 62 words long. And, a lot of technical writers just add commas. Anyway, if they use the readability statistic tool, you can Google that, readability statistics, and it'll show you how to set it up in Word. And then if you need some additional help, just contact Michael or me about it. But it really at least gives people a guide to show, where I'm writing, what level, and am I hitting my audience with that with the grade levels.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, emphasize to our listeners that we're not talking about writing at a fourth grade level, like so many people say you have to write at a fourth grade level. You want to write
No,
intelligently, but real intelligence is being able to communicate things simply and clearly. The person who doesn't communicate clearly is not displaying intelligence by using big words or by creating dense writing or trying to obfuscate what is really being said there. Intelligence, well, it was Leonardo da Vinci who said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's absolutely true, because if a person cannot explain it, they don't really cannot explain it in simple terms so that a 12-year-old can understand it. That signals to you that they don't understand it. And when you see writing that's written that way, then you should beware. You should beware, because this is a person who has got an issue with communication, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. And sometimes, we can't really understand that. I'll give you one example of simplicity that works very well. There's a novelist whose name is Nicholas Sparks. Many of you might know him. A lot of his novels have sold millions of copies, and movies have been made after them. Now, he's not my type of writer. I like stuff that's a little bit more complex. But the fact of the matter is, if you pick up a Nicholas Sparks novel, you start to read it, and this is the same we would want for even a business document. There's no work involved. It's easy. It's clear. You don't feel, it's not bedtime reading to where this is going to make me tired because I'm going to have to work at figuring things out. It's very clear. They're simple stories. They're simple time-tested stories. And that's a big part of what we need to do is make it clear. Think in terms of stories, if it's appropriate. Telling a good story that's in a manner that's time-tested, time-honored. Now, that's why I say hiring a professional writer is certainly the way to go for a company, and making sure that is being done right, because telling stories is not a simple matter. Achieving readability is not always a simple matter. We're not really taught that well in school, how to write properly. I've talked to Julie, and I have talked about this before, about the not being really taught properly in school. So there are certain people who make that their life's work, to be able to communicate in writing in a proficient manner. Those are the kind of people you want representing your company when it comes time to put out, to purvey some written communication.
Exactly. And, Michael, I always learn more about writing when I listen to you. You have such wonderful ideas and present them so eloquently. One last thing I would say about readability and readers is, you mentioned it at the beginning, where you said that readers today are impatient. They want to see it, read it, understand it, and make a decision. They don't want to have to go through paragraph after paragraph to get to the bottom line, as they say. So visually, sometimes putting your writing at a way that people can read it in bite-sized chunks. That's why bullets, not too many of them, but bullets can work, and white space works as a way for a reader to go through your writing in a very logical way where the information is unpacked. So that visual cue for readers is also appreciated.
And you're talking about formatting there in part, and that is a topic we should take up next month then, Julie, because we've talked about that topic and wanting to do a video podcast on that topic. I think that would be an excellent one for next month. Agreed?
Sounds great.
Fantastic. All right, listeners, thank you as always for joining us, and we'll be back next month, and our topic will be formatting your documents. Very important, as Julie just highlighted. We'll go deeper on that one. Until then, practice wellness in your writing.